Hello! Welcome back for another programming tutorial. I'm Johnny Delgado, and today we're going to talk about loops. So, what are loops? Why do we bother using them? Loops are a way for us to do something repeatedly. It's a part of the code that loops over and over again. And this is great because something that computers are really good at, which we as humans might not be able to do as well, is do the exact same thing over and over every single time, 100 times. I could re-record this intro for the video 100 times, and each one would be different, and slowly I'd forget all the words I'd say. In fact, I can't even remember what I said now. But a computer could do something like print out a statement 100 times and never get it wrong. Now, you already know how to do that in a non-loop form. We would just say system.out.println and then whatever thing, like in this case, hello world. And we know that if it prints, it just says hello world, and we can, go ahead and copy this and paste it a bunch of times. And as you might expect, it would just print out hello world a bunch of times. But I don't want to do this. Let's say you want to print out a program that prints, all the numbers from 0 to 100. I could hard code it and just write it out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm starting at 0 once again because in programming we count from 0. The first index in something like the first character of a string, our first index is 0. If you say, give me the index of the first letter in a string, it's going to give you 0. I could start writing it like this, but look how long it took for me to just print out 5 numbers. That takes too long. How do we turn this into something really simple that I don't have to think about? So we use loops, and I'll show you how to do a while loop, which is probably the most basic kind of loop you'll deal with, or probably the most basic kind of loop there is. So this is just a piece of code that runs when whatever is in this parenthesis here is true. So if I say while true, there we go. If I say while true, everything in here will run forever. So I could say, test and try to run it. And look at that, it's printing forever. See how this just keeps on scrolling? I need to manually stop it because look at all the times it printed out the word test. That is like, here, if you can't see it clearly, yeah. This is called an infinite loop. And we don't like that in programming because there's no way for the program to stop. And usually when we're having the program do something, we want it to have a defined end. But what this does tell us is while what's in here is true, the code within these curly brackets is just going to run forever. Now, what do you think would happen if I put false right here? Now, you're seeing that there's some kind of error, but try to take a guess. What would print out in this code? Pause the video if you need to. Okay, if you guessed that it would print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and never print out test, you're correct. Although this says unreachable code. Now, that's an error that we can still run. Oh, never mind. It actually complains. So, if this did run, this part would never go. Because this says unreachable code, it's not letting it run whatsoever. We're not going to worry about that. All you need to know is you say while and then put your parentheses, and if the stuff inside the parentheses is true, the while loop will run multiple times. forever until what's in these parentheses becomes false. So how do we change that? Because we don't want it to run infinitely, and we don't want it to never run, because as we can see, if it never runs, the code just won't run. Well, you actually have to make some kind of variable for while loops, or some kind of condition that allows whatever is in here to change, to be variable. So I'm going to create a let's create an integer. We've already tried it with booleans. The true or false, those are boolean values. So I'm going to say int, let's call it count. And let's start that at 0. And let's say while count is, let's say while count is less than 5. And then here, because I want to count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm starting at 0. We're actually going to put count in here. I'll comment this out so you can see that anything that does run is coming from the loop. Now, pause. What do you think might happen here? Think about what the output of this is, because I don't have any more errors. It seems like it will run. But is it what we want? Remember, we want it to print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see. Okay. Another infinite loop. Notice how it doesn't warn us about infinite loops. It just allows us to do it. It's because we're not changing this value count at all. So I'm going to say count equals count plus 1. And those of you who are extra savvy might know I could just write this as count plus plus. To show you what that would look like, it would be this. And you're correct. It's just this is a more clear way of saying what I'm trying to convey. We're going to set the value of count to itself plus 1. So 0 plus 1 then becomes 1. And then once it's at 1, 1 plus 1 will equal 2. So now, what do you think is going to happen? Does this get us where we want to be? And sure enough, yes it does. There we go. Notice how I have a less than symbol here. If I wanted this to count 0 to 5, I could just make it less than or equals. And there you go. Now it prints out 5. And it doesn't matter if we say less than 5 or less than or equal to 4. These will get us the same result. But for now, I'll do less than 5 just because I like it that way. And now let's try to do this simpler. You know, here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of code, 5 if you count this final curly bracket. I want this to be shorter just because, I like cleaner code. So let's talk about for loops. And for loops are they're a more clean way of giving you these kinds of results. They're great when you have a specific number of times something needs to run. While loops can be used in situations where maybe you'll just keep running it until some other thing happens. Like if you ask the user a yes or no question, and you say, keep asking questions until the user says yes. Every time the user hits no, the variable is going to check, oh, that was no, so our Boolean at the top is true, and keep running it forever until it says yes. Then we're going to change that one variable to false, and the while loop is going to stop running. But the reason I used a numeric example for this is because for loops can give us the exact same thing in a much nicer looking way. So to make a for loop, you say for, and then you put your parentheses. Remember, loops are defined, you can always spot where the conditional check is by the parentheses. So in the for loop, we're going to create a new variable. I'm actually going to create the same variable that I did up here, and I'll copy and paste it just to emphasize that. Let's give us some more room here. So I'm going to create a variable count and set it to an initial value of 0. I think that'll probably go away. Then we say we want to have our conditional here. So we have our variable declaration, our conditional, which in this case is count is less than 5. And then we want to have this up here. You're noticing I'm not typing any new code. I'm just copying 1, 2, 3 into my parenthetical, separated by semicolons. And something else to point out, you don't need a semicolon after the last part of this. And add in my curly brackets the same way that we had here. And that's it. I mean, we need to, of course, have the code do something, give it something to loop through. But this code and this code are functionally identical. And I'll prove that to you by running it. Sure enough, it prints out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like we wanted. But let's talk about why that is. What's this doing? So we're creating an integer or some kind of variable that's going to be changing over the course of running this loop. And then we're setting the conditional statement. This equals a Boolean value. This is count is less than 5 is always going to return true or false, because the inequality operator that will compare count and 5 and spit out a true or false value. And while this is true, this is going to run. And it might seem counterintuitive that I just explained this, then the body of the loop. But I did that on purpose, because it's not until after this runs that this final part, count equals count plus 1, will run. That's why I began by explaining this form, because this operates in order. You create the variable, then you check it, then you run your code, then you modify the variable. In this, it's a little bit out of order, but once you get used to it, I think we can agree that this is a much shorter, simpler way of writing. Well, maybe not simpler, but it's a shorter way of writing all of this. So back to the first part. I said I wanted to print out every single number between 0 and 100 inclusive, and let's do that. And I want to include 100, so I'm going to add this equals sign, and let's go ahead and run it. And sure enough, we have every single number without fail. Now, wasn't that easier than me manually typing in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 100? And that is the power of loops. I hope you learned something. I hope you have a good day. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.